This one's all about how I kicked alcohol out of my life in 2025 and the domino effect it had across all areas of my life. It really did have a ripple effect. I just want to start by talking about how my story began, using drugs and alcohol. Middle school, I guess, technically. I don't know the exact time frame now. It's been such a while, but I probably smoked my first marijuana cigarette somewhere around 13, 14, 15 years old, middle school, a little bit before middle school, I guess, technically. Um, and then that kind of really started the process. As I got into middle school and high school, started smoking daily, chronic use, I guess you could say, right? As I was able to earn money, I was able to buy pot on a regular basis. And so I did. And got into a little bit of recreational drug use outside of pot too, but that never really became a major problem for me. Never got hooked on anything really hard, so I dabbled here and there and did some partying for sure as a young person, but pot was the big one, right? Smoking pot daily, became a pothead, hung out with potheads, had the pothead personality, persona. Like that's what I thought. I thought it was cool to be a pothead. Essentially, it's how I made friends. It's how I felt comfortable, and I lived my life like that for a really long time. As I became an adult, I kept doing that, and it just got to the point where it was daily life to just smoke, wake up and smoke. Lunch, smoking throughout the entire day. This is before pens existed and all that kind of stuff too. So I was smoking flower, using a little bowl here and there. And I did that until I was like 40 years old, until recently, obviously, right? That's my story here about how I quit. But we're mainly going to talk about the booze and how quitting the booze allowed me to do other things, which I'm leading up to that. But that allowed me to quit smoking pot eventually, too, and using pot. But alcohol wasn't really a problem for me until I got into my 30s or so, I guess, is when alcohol started to become more of a big player in my life. I can remember buying 6 packs of beer and drinking them over the course of the weekend, and just, it wasn't a big deal. I could have a beer, just have a beer. I was working out a lot at the time, eating pretty healthy. I was in pretty good shape, possibly some of the best shape of my life back then until recently. And it just wasn't a big deal, I could buy the beer, it could sit in the fridge. Went through a little mixology phase where I was mixing up drinks all the time. Thought that was really fun, but I just don't feel like I had a problem. It was like this slippery slope. The pitcher plant is what Alan Carr in The Easy Method of Quitting, The Easy Way. It's a really cool book I'll talk more about in just a bit here too, but it kind of just crept up on me out of nowhere. It feels like, I look back and I don't even know how it happened exactly, but I feel like I just went from drinking a 6 pack over the weekend to crushing a 12 pack every night. And I just don't know how that happened, like where it came from. It seems like it was a blur. I don't even, like, thinking back, I just can't pin the moment where I was like, whoa, like I'm drinking way more all of a sudden. But it happened. I got to this point where I would pick up a 12 pack of beer every single night, Miller Lite, Miller time, and I'd get home, my wife would go to bed, I'd hop on the computer, game with the boys, and get drunk. And I'd drink all the beers and I'd want more. I'd go rummaging around looking for anything, and I would even hide a beer or two from my wife, or if my wife hid one from me, I'd find those ones and I'd drink them. And if there was a little bit of liquor up on the fridge, there always was. I wasn't a big spirit drinker, but I might have one more little nightcap because I wasn't ready for the party to end. And I did that for a while. I did some Twitch streaming and just went through this whole phase of my life where I would play video games late, 12 a.m., 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, getting drunk, drinking my 12 pack. And it evolved to where eventually I started just drinking all the time. Miller time became any time for me. I could wake up in the morning and drink a beer. I could have a beer for lunch. I loved having a beer for lunch, actually. I loved having a breakfast beer at one point, too. Having a work beer. It got pretty bad at one point. Leading up until the Appalachian Trail thru hike me and my wife did in 2021, I was just drinking all the time. I would drink on my lunch break at work. I would drink before I'd go to work, just having beers all the time. And then still, get my 12 pack, maybe an 18 pack some nights too. The weekend, maybe I get 18 or 24 beers for the weekend and crush those down. Wake up feeling like absolute trash in the morning, and I'd have to get up early a lot of the time too, and just feeling awful. And I feel like I did that for like 10 years. I don't really, was it really that much? I don't know if it was, but I feel like from 30 to 40, like there was this progression of drinking, like probably like 35 onward is where it really got worse than ever probably. But even when we were through hiking the Appalachian Trail, I feel like I was just trying to get to the next city, get off the trail and buy beer and get party mode. Got off the trail, continued that trend, and then after the trail, I realized somewhere deep down that I didn't want to do that anymore. And we'd had a sober October before the trail where me and my wife, we quit smoking and drinking for a whole month. I even quit all types of other stuff too. I made it like this crazy hard mode challenge where I just didn't do anything for a whole month basically. But so I had dabbled in, not using alcohol, and just to go a little further back, I used to be a cigarette smoker. I quit that a long, long time ago too. That one was an easier quit for me. I mean, the actual stopping is hard, like that craving that I'm going to stop at the store and get a pack of cigarettes, just one more today. And I always try and time the quit. I'd try and smoke that last cigarette at the end of the night so that I could wake up fresh in the morning and not have to go buy a pack. That was the easier way for me to stop that one, is getting up in the morning. I didn't have any cigarettes, so there'd be this drive to work. I would go past this 7-Eleven where I'd buy a Bang, a Quest bar, and maybe a pack of cigarettes, and this temptation was always there to get the smokes. And eventually I stopped. I was able to quit that, and it was no big deal for a while there after I'd stopped for a while. It gets easier once you've been off for a while, I feel like. Pot, same thing. I tried to quit pot multiple times, way before my 30s even. I knew there was probably more to life than just getting high all the time, but it was hard. I would try to stop, and then I'd call up a friend who I knew had pot, and I'd go hang out with him, and I'd smoke and get high and feel guilty immediately after doing it. Rinse and repeat that cycle for a while, and then I'd just stop trying to quit again, and it was what it was. But the alcohol, I knew it was really becoming a problem when I was pretty good at exercising my willpower, especially during like weight loss phases or training phases. I was still training for marathons and drinking, sometimes running drunk even, getting the miles in even though I was plastered some days, just running outside drunk, getting my miles in. It's insane thinking about it, but I did have a way of exercising my discipline and my willpower, and I could do it from time to time really well and force myself to do other things. But I started to feel like a crazy person, like a schizophrenic type of person, where there was two versions of me, one who wanted to drink all the time, and then the other one who was saying, no, now's not the right time. And I felt like I was arguing with myself, and I just did not like that feeling of this internal dialogue with myself about when I can and can't have a beer, because I always wanted a beer. And it got to the point where I realized that when I would get drunk, like all the other things that I knew were important would not get done. I'd compromise on training. Again, most of the time I was pretty good at this, but it did lead to plenty of, compromise on training, compromise on diet. I've been overweight the majority of my adult life by a good 30, 40, 50 plus pounds. I've got all the way up to 225 pounds at one point, just absolutely large for a 5'10", 5'11" dude. And I blame alcohol for a lot of it. You know, when I would get drunk, I'd eat whatever I want and just binge stuff. And I mean, 12-pack of beer by itself is a lot of calories, even when you're just drinking Miller Lights, you know. What is it, 96 per beer times 12? It's a lot, you know, over 1,000 plus calories a day in alcohol. You know, I don't even believe the body metabolizes that stuff like it does food. So, you know, all that taken into consideration, just not happy with where I was. I was becoming a jerk at the same time, too. Like, I went past that phase of being a fun drunk where now I was becoming an angry drunk. I would get mad and rude and yell at my friends on the video games and stuff, and go into work and be rude to people for no reason, too. Jealousy, maybe. One of my friends made a sale. One of my peers sold something better than I did that day, and I'd get mad at him and take it out on him. I was just becoming a really nasty, rude, angry person, it felt like. And I think it was just because I wasn't happy with who I was at the end of the day, and I knew the drinking was causing a lot of that, right? So feeling like I'm having this inner debate with myself all the time, trying to fight this urge to have a beer at any point in the day, you know, waking up feeling like I'm ready to chug a beer already. I didn't like that. You know, that's when I knew there was a problem, and I wanted to stop, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It was just like that drive to work in the morning, picking up the cigarettes, you know, picking up the beer on the way home from work, or leaving to go to lunch break and drink on lunch. So all those challenges added up. I found that Alan Carr book too, The Easy Way Method, which I would highly encourage anyone who's maybe struggling like I was. I would read that book. I think there's a lot of mental clarity that can be provided from reading that. Some of the tricks we tell ourselves about our addictions, I feel like it does a good job of dismantling a lot of that stuff and kind of blowing back that fog of war, I guess, right? And making it a little bit easier to see the truth about what's really happening. And when you combine that with a genuine want to stop and be better and to not get drunk all the time, I think that's the powerful combination you really need, or I needed at least, to finally make the change and quit. But I've had more like off and ons with quitting. Quitting's not some easy thing you just do once and you're done. At least it wasn't for me. Maybe there's people out there who can just cold turkey their first time and never pick it up again. Power to you. That's really impressive if you can do that. I was unable to do that. I had to stop multiple times throughout my entire life, just this challenge of quitting things. And I just knew I didn't want to have to rely on these vices, these crutches, right? Crutches is the term I always use for it. I wanted to just get to a point in my life where I could be happy just being myself without any external influence. And I feel like I'm finally getting there now, right? So training for the Missoula Marathon was one of the biggest, monumentous things for me. That was a 2024 race. And I quit drinking for 9 months leading up to that race. 9 whole months, I didn't drink. Still smoking daily. You know, that was not an issue. I was smoking, baby. If I can't drink, I'm smoking. I got my medical marijuana card, so I had ample access to high-grade quality pot, little vapor pens, everything, right? So I was smoking, not drinking, and I felt really good during that 9-month window not drinking alcohol. Really good. I was happy. I was proud of myself that I could go that long without drinking. I had a goal for that marathon to run a sub 5 hour. Wasn't losing any weight, really, for some reason. I was still eating pretty decent. You know, I figured I was training hard, so I ate hard too, and still smoking, which I think that led to some late night binging and stuff. But I said, oh, you know, when the race is over, I could have a drink. And I ended up having a drink when the race was over that night. I remember that internal struggle, that dialogue in my head again about it too, because I knew myself I knew that if I drank one, it opens this floodgate in my mind where if I've already had one, why not just keep having them the next day and the next day and the next day? So it's like, that's when I realized it was just easier to not drink. I don't think I'm able to just have one or two or three or four and stop, because now that switch is flipped in my brain again, and I'm back to Miller time. Miller time is any time for me, and I just don't like feeling that. So you're always like arguing with yourself, like I can control, I can moderate my usage, and the easy way book kind of tricks you. Like, it doesn't tell you in the beginning like that the ultimate catch is you're gonna stop completely, and that's what the goal is, because most people won't, I don't think, vibe with that very well right in the beginning. Quitting completely. People, we don't want to feel like we're giving something up, but I no longer feel like that. I feel like I didn't give up anything. I feel like I've gained a whole lot in this process of quitting alcohol. And I watched a peer at work too who was a big smoker, not a drinker, but a smoker. And I watched this person give up pot. He gave up pot, and he started to become very ambitious in his life. He started to do things at work and in his private life that were pretty compelling to see, and it was kind of motivating even to watch somebody make these changes to their life after they had quit, smoking. So, but fast forward back to that marathon, right? I had a beer that night after the race. I did accomplish my sub 5 hour goal. I got a 4:58 marathon that day. I was really excited. Got a little emotional crossing the finish line, and I had the Boston aspirations. Like, I've got a goal to qualify for the Boston Marathon now, and I'm losing weight. I'm getting faster. I've been base training, getting off topic, but drinking that night had a domino effect, just like quitting did in other aspects. But that had a domino impact where I had stopped drinking for 9 months. Guess what? I just started drinking again for the next 9 months, almost every single day. I tried to quit again a few times, but struggled to do so, because once I'd start, it was like Pringles. Once you start, you can't stop. At least that's how it was for me. The initial stopping is the hardest part for me personally. It really is just that drive, the amount of willpower and convincing myself this is the right decision. That's the hardest part of not using for me personally, is the initial stopping. Once I can get past that and have some momentum, once I have a streak going, I love streaks. I track everything. So once I have a streak going, it's a lot easier for me to maintain the streak versus start a fresh one. So that was my biggest hurdle, the initial stopping. And that might not be the same for everyone else, but that was most certainly my big challenge, just getting the first few days in and not breaking under pressure. And I had a lot of pressure, a lot of, triggers in my life. My environment where I was working at the time was really challenging with my coworkers to not drink. It was kind of like an enabled workforce area for me at the time where everyone around me drank. So it was really challenging to have to just change my behavior completely and become like an entirely new person, and then to see everyone going out, and then here I am stuck not going out. It felt like that at times, but that's when I started using ChatGPT and using it like a life coach. So I would just, instead of bugging a real person, I didn't have a sponsor, I didn't do any AA stuff. I never thought I needed that. I could just quit on my own, which I've been successful at. Different strokes for different folks. Whatever you want to use to quit, that's great. But I didn't want to go down that road, so I would use ChatGPT. I would tell it, hey, all the boys went out for lunch. I'm not going. I'm feeling like I want to, though. And it did a really good job of, talking me down and helping me out in a lot of scenarios. And I'm pretty happy with how it works as a tool in that regard. So I would recommend using it in that fashion. my first video, I talk a little bit about my system and how I use it. I'm going to do some more in-depth videos with how I actually use that platform and do my daily accountability coaching and stuff. But the quitting of the alcohol allowed me to make some really powerful changes. Like I said in the beginning, that was a domino effect for me. Once I quit the alcohol, I knew I was going to quit the pot next, especially after seeing my friend, my coworker, do it. I was like, I know I can do it too. I know I need to do it. I just wanted to live sober for a bit, try something completely new. I've never been sober for more than a handful of weeks, a month maybe. That Sober October challenge before we hiked the trail, that might have been the most sober I've ever been as an adult, that 1 month window. So now I finally kicked the booze again, right? I don't remember the date exactly. July 2025, I think, is when I started Project 100. And I quit, a few weeks into that. I quit the alcohol. And then I already had my eyes set on pot next. Like, I knew that was the next big goal, was to quit the reefer. But I didn't want to hammer myself and my willpower too hard and do both at the same time. I figured that might overwhelm myself. So I gave myself a little buffer window. And then I ended up quitting it a lot sooner than I thought I would. I felt like I was ready to just give it up, so I gave it up. And it wasn't really that difficult after the first week. Quitting alcohol was way harder in my experience, but I think quitting the booze gave me more confidence to quit the pot too. And I have to say, I feel really good now. My life didn't just dramatically change for the better all of a sudden because I quit smoking pot and drinking alcohol, but I feel a lot better. Like, I have this confidence in myself that's been renewed, and it's allowed me to really dial in and focus harder. That second half of 2025, I really dialed in and started to make some life changes that have been, consistent life changes, not just flimsy, fleeting change where I do things for a little bit and then revert back to the way I was. I've made meaningful weight loss. I feel really good about my body. I'm not exactly where I want to be yet, but I'm 1,000 times better feeling than I was in the past. I feel thin and light and healthy right now. I've started to take my health more seriously, my sleep more seriously. My brain, I've started to read again. I'm reading Against the Machine, The Unmaking of Humanity right now. It's a really interesting book. My goal is to read at least one book this year each month. And I'm on pace to do more than that right now. I've got some really cool books lined up. I'd like to do some book reports on this channel. Maybe write an essay. Like, I really want to challenge myself in that regard, start using my brain. I'd like to get a bachelor's degree. I'm getting my A+ certifications to attempt a career switch at 40. Just trying to get uncomfortable, journaling, setting up home labs, computer equipment, all types of fun stuff that I'm doing right now. Networking. Pot made me so, closed off. I didn't want to go out and interact with other people when I was high and do things of that nature. And I am an introverted person by nature, I feel like, but I can be pretty extroverted at times too. But the pot just really, magnified the introversion there, and I wouldn't want to go out and interact with people and stuff like that. I'd rather smoke my pot, play my video games, and be inside the house. So, really meaningful changes though. Relationship changing. I think I have a much better relationship with my wife now, with my children. My older son, I think he still smokes and drinks a little bit. He lives in a different state, so I can't easily see what he's up to, but he's pretty open with me, and I'm trying to be a better role model for him now, so I'm pretty honest and open with him about how my life's going right now, the changes I've made, because I would smoke with him as an adult and stuff, being totally transparent there, not proud of his behaviors, but just being honest. So now that I don't do any of that stuff, I make sure to mention it to him, as not to be preachy and stuff, but to try and instill into him, hey man, I have some regret about how I lived the last 20 years of my life, and not regret in the sense like I'm killing myself about it. You know, I'm letting that go. That part of me is dead now, but I'm trying to at least impress upon him that maybe there's a better way. Don't do what I did and waste 20 years of your life doing this stuff. So, outside of all that, though, things have been going really good, and I'm really happy that I'm off drugs, I'm off alcohol, no more reefer, no more booze, making some really meaningful, lasting changes. I feel like 2026 is going to be an amazing year. It's going to be a weird year, obviously. There's a lot of weird stuff happening out there in the world, but I feel better equipped to deal with it all now through all this. So I think that's all I've got. I don't really know if I want to beat the horse any further here, so I hope my story is something that you might be able to relate to, and I hope somebody out there could take some value from that. And hopefully, if you're on the fence about quitting and you feel like you really want to, I don't think you have anything to lose. I think you have everything to gain by doing it. So give it a shot. Thanks.